So a lot of people have been asking about my journey, and I'm happy to share that. I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but okay, if it helps people, I'll recap a little bit from growing up in Germany to now. So I was born in Germany, grew up there, went to a private school there for 1 year to study film music. Then I went to the Netherlands, lived there, learned the language, everything for 4 years, did a bachelor's degree at the Artes Conservatory in composition for film and theater. And then I came to the United States to live in Los Angeles. I went to UCLA, and then I was hired right out of college by Cinesamples. The way I got that job was they had an open audition going on Facebook. I think they were originally looking for additional mock-up people. And so I submitted, and along with a resume and a cover letter and, all the proper stuff. And funny enough, the manager there at the time had previously been a long-term assistant of Junkie XL, who also went to the Artes Conservatory. So he was kind of curious, and he also said, I asked him later, why me? And he said, well, your mock-up didn't suck. And weird way to phrase that. And, your email and cover letter and everything was just so concise and so clean. And, it just, they needed someone like that. So a week later I interviewed. I definitely didn't have the best mock-up. And so they said, you know what, we feel like there's potential. Why don't you start at Cinesamples as a studio assistant, part-time, and do that thing and help us make libraries, and you're going to learn a ton and write demos and, learn everything about sample libraries. And at the same time, you can also work for a sister company, Hollywood Scoring, and learn how to get your mock-ups to a professional level, and assist us on the projects that we have there. So that's what I ended up doing. So I worked on a lot of products for Cinesamples. I mean, I helped make Cinestrings. I made the Dulcimer Zither library, and I helped with various updates to Cineperk and Cinewinds and Cinebells. I made the Tina Guo Legato. I helped a little bit on the other Tina Guo libraries. I don't remember everything that I worked on. Whatever was necessary. I also did customer support for them, and whatever needed to be done, I did. And at the same time, I worked as a score coordinator and in supporting roles for Hollywood Scoring, where I got to, work a little bit on League of Legends, and did a couple mock-ups for Joel McNeely, which was fun and interesting. And then eventually they let me move over to Hollywood Scoring full-time as a staff composer, where I then worked on Halo 5. And I worked on mock-ups for Alan Menken and a Fox show and, all kinds of stuff, whatever came up. And so we were located at the time at Christopher Leonard's studio, Sonic Fuel. He owns that studio along with another composer called Tim Wynn. And I had been there for around 2 years at that point, so we all knew each other. There were Christmas parties, and we were hanging out in the hallways and kitchens and stuff. There were a lot of rooms with a lot of different composers, so it wasn't just us. And what ended up happening was Chris was doing a show with Alan Menken and heard that I had done a mock-up and was already familiar with the song material, and therefore he was like, how do you feel about, helping me with that show, helping me with the score, and incorporating Alan's songs? And so I did that for both seasons of Gallivant, did, arrangements and additional music and that type of thing. And then at the same time, I kind of went freelance for a while, and I also helped out at Bill Ross's studio with some orchestration and mostly tech work as well, because I was still very much ingrained in the tech side of things with sample libraries, so a lot of composer studios found that very helpful. So I did that freelance for a while until Gallivant really took over my life for a while, so I had to kind of reduce my hours with with Bill. And then what else came up? Then I assisted Pinar Toprak on a movie for a couple of months. I did some mock-ups for Ryan Shore. And at the time I was friends with the studio assistant of Steve Jablonski, who needed a bit of help at the time, printing stems, preparing files for orchestration. So she got me in on that. And yeah, I started to do a lot of tech work there every now and then. I also fixed computers on his home rig, and it was very interesting for me because I had never worked on a system that complicated in a way, because he worked on this really old-fashioned system with a, dedicated machine room and hardware samplers and all that. The younger composers, specifically ones that don't come out of remote control, they work, much more with multiple computers and Vienna Ensemble Pro. So I was working on an older system that was, hardwired from Cubase into Pro Tools, and it was a very different way of doing things. So I really appreciated learning that because it's very, very interesting. And so then I was waiting for my new visa to come through, and while I was waiting, I couldn't really work. So Steve's assistant said, well, why don't we get you in with remote control productions? So that's when I started my internship at Hans Zimmer's studio. And it was quite nice to see that massive of an operation. Because it's like 5 buildings and it's like a whole block in Santa Monica. And it's really impressive what they've built up there. And as an intern, you get a lot of sit-ins, so it was really interesting. I got one with Lorne Balfe, who was super nice. I thought he was going to kick me out, and he didn't. He, even engaged in conversation, and that was really lovely. I also had a sit-in with Heitor Pereira, who was really nice to me. Who else? Some Bleeding Fingers people who were also very kind. I had a bunch of sit-ins with Jeff Zanelli's team. They were super nice. Who else? Alan Meyerson. If you ever do an internship at Remote Control and Alan Meyerson is there, do have a sit-in with him. He very clearly loves to teach. In between loading cues, he would always turn around and see if we had any questions and if he could explain something. And you could see that he enjoys this. So he actually engaged the most in the whole teaching aspect of it. So I really enjoyed that. So if you get a chance, do have a sit-in with Alan Meyerson and do ask him questions. Because it's so useful. Even just 10 minutes with him, you can learn so much. And then once my internship there was done and I had a work permit again, I was called by Klaus Badelt. I'm pretty sure in German his name would be pronounced Klaus Badelt, but everybody here calls him Klaus Badelt, so I'm just gonna roll with that. He was scoring an animated movie called Leap. I think in Europe it was called Ballerina. And he needed help, additional writing help. And so he had me over, we had a coffee, and then I got a briefing. And basically the next day I was delivering cues and I was hired. So yeah, that was kind of the turning point for me, I think, where I was consistently hired to be a composer and not do tech work anymore or, anything else. And eventually he and I sat down and decided that we were going to collaborate further with him as a score producer and me as the composer. And we're still doing that. That's an ongoing thing. And we've done a ton of productions, which was really beneficial for the both of us. And that's kind of how I got a lot of clients that otherwise I wouldn't have gotten, that would have been too big for me. Because normally I wouldn't have gotten, budgets to record at Abbey Road or Air or, to always have recording budgets pretty much. That's kind of not a thing for someone my age. And especially at that point, I was still in my 20s. So, that's normally not a thing. But yeah, due to this collaboration, I got all that. And that was great. I could build up my own studio, my own team, and, it kind of grew from there. I also still did some sampling work for Big Fish Audio and for some private developers. making custom libraries for composers, which I don't really do anymore because it's not necessarily work that I ever enjoyed that much. But, you know, at the time I was like, it's good to have that income stream and to keep those chops. Yeah, and beyond that, I always kept my own filmmaker relationships. I always did short films on the side and other stuff. And that kind of around the same time that Klaus kind of started collaborating with me, those relationships also started paying off a little bit, and they were starting to make bigger things that they could give to me. Then we had a bunch of other composers that, you know, just recommended me for something that they didn't want. And so more and more within the year of 2016, 2017, I just kind of couldn't even do any assistant work anymore because I was too swamped with actual writing and having my own team. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. In 2016, I also did the ASCAP workshop with Richard Bellis, which was great. That actually prompted me hiring help for the first time because I couldn't do the workshop and all the other stuff I had lined up that kind of collided at the same time. And so I had to get help. And yeah, ever since it's been, you know, all recommendations. I mean, all of these gigs, aside from the very first one, I got through recommendations. And Klaus didn't hear from me through a recommendation. I think he heard my Cinesamples demos or something. Something really old at the time, but he was probably buying a library and was like on SoundCloud listening to demos and going, she doesn't suck. Maybe let's get her. So yeah, that was a thing. But every other thing that I got was pretty much through recommendations or through people finding me online. But mostly recommendations. And a lot of it also came from just being here, because none of this I would have gotten if I hadn't been an LA resident already. So yeah, that's been my journey. And I mean, I have some really exciting stuff lined up this year, but I can't talk about it yet because contracts have not been signed yet, and I'm not gonna jinx it. But yeah, there's some really exciting stuff, and I think it's a very gradual way forward. Again, I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but even with the producers and filmmakers that I already have, I'm already very booked until spring next year or summer next year. So, you know, it's a good position to be in for sure, and I'm very much enjoying this job. It's been a very rough journey, I will say that. I think about 6 years in, I found a manager, and that wasn't easy. I mean, I struggled with a lot of things. I struggled financially for a long time. I was living in low-income housing, and I had no money, no healthcare, nothing. And I struggled with immigration, and I also struggled with finding an agent, or in my case, manager. I had some really nice meetings. Most agents that I reached out to ignored me. I had some really nice meetings where I got some really wonderful advice. I had some not so nice meetings where I got terrible advice. But eventually, again, through a recommendation, I got my manager right now that I still have 2 years later. She is still putting her faith in me, which is great. Bless her. So yeah, that was also a journey, just finding representation. And, you know, now we're in the mix with executives and kind of trying the transition into studio productions, and have been for the past 2 years. I mean, yeah, I got some stuff on Netflix now, and there's more stuff that is coming on Netflix this year. But yeah, there's some other stuff that I think is going to be equally interesting. And yeah, it's a very slow journey. I mean, even now, I have well over 60 credits at this point. And even now, it's you know, very difficult to move further up the ladder. It takes so much time to gain people's trust, and being a constant presence in people's lives, and being constantly out there, putting new stuff out there, being constantly present on social media, doing PR. It's like a whole package of effort that has to be put in. And it's a bit exhausting sometimes, but I feel like as long as we're moving forward, which we are, it's good. We're fine, you know? So I'll hopefully I'll get there. That's it for now. I mean, maybe one day I'll do an update video on this from this point forward to see what actually happened. Who knows? Maybe it's all gonna fall apart in a year, or not. So let's see where this journey is going. I don't know. It's all about patience and doing the work, I suppose.